The quantum arrays aboard the research vessel Stellar Horizon hummed softly as Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed the latest astronomical data. The ship drifted at the edge of the Carina Nebula, its sensors probing the cosmic depths for signs of habitable worlds. After 6 months of deep space exploration, the crew of 15 had settled into a comfortable routine, their mission to map potential colony sites proceeding exactly as planned. None of them could have known that this ordinary day would change the course of human history forever. The first indication of trouble came when the ship's AI detected an anomalous energy signature. 3 vessels of unknown design dropped out of faster-than-light travel less than 10,000 kilometers from their position. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Unknown vessels on an intercept course," announced Lieutenant James Rodriguez from his position at Tactical. "No response to our standard greeting protocols." Captain Maya Patel straightened in her chair, her expression calm despite the gravity of the situation. Humanity had encountered alien life before. Primitive bacterial colonies and simple organisms, but never an advanced spacefaring civilization. "Continue broadcasting on all frequencies. Make it clear we're a peaceful research vessel." The alien ships drew closer, their movements precise and predatory. When they finally responded, it wasn't with words but with action. A purple beam lanced out from the lead vessel, cutting through the Stellar Horizon's shields as if they weren't there. "Multiple hull breaches," Rodriguez shouted as warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. They're boarding us." The creatures that emerged from the boarding pods moved with unsettling grace, their bodies protected by armor that seemed to absorb light itself. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and digitigrade legs that ended in razor-sharp talons. Their helmets retracted like liquid mercury, revealing faces that appeared to be carved from crystalline material, with multiple sets of compound eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. "I am Archon Vexthra of the Nexari Dominion," the leader announced in perfect English, their voice resonating with harmonic overtones that made the humans' teeth ache. "Your species has been observed and found wanting. You will submit to testing." Dr. Chen watched in horror as the aliens systematically subdued the crew, using some kind of neural suppressor that left them conscious but paralyzed. But it was what happened next that would ignite an inferno of rage across human space. Among the crew was Dr. Chen's daughter, Lucy, a 12-year-old prodigy who had been granted special permission to join the research mission. As the Nexari began their testing, a brutal process of biological sampling and psychological evaluation, Lucy managed to slip away in the chaos. The girl made it to the emergency beacon controls, her small hands flying over the console as she input the distress code. Just 3 digits remained when Archon Vexthra discovered her. The alien leader studied her with clinical detachment, as one might regard an insect. "Fascinating," Vexthra said, mandibles clicking. "The young demonstrates superior cognitive adaptation. This specimen will provide valuable data." What happened next would be transmitted across human space by the ship's still-functioning internal sensors. The Nexari, in their cold pursuit of knowledge, decided to conduct a live dissection. They ignored Lucy's pleading, her tears, her desperate calls for her mother. To them, she was merely data to be collected, another variable in their grand experiment to catalog and classify the galaxy's species. The emergency beacon, though incomplete, managed to transmit a partial signal. Across the void of space, the final moments of Lucy Chen reached humanity's colonies and eventually Earth itself. The response would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in hardened bunkers that had existed since the early days of space exploration, ancient computers began to wake. Humanity had always prepared for the worst, had always known that the cosmos might hold dangers beyond imagination. But no one had expected the protocols would be activated because of a single child's death. The message that spread across human space was simple. The Nexari killed a child. Protocol Prometheus is now in effect. In the following hours, as the recording of Lucy's final moments reached more and more of humanity, something fundamental changed in the human psyche. This wasn't just an act of war. It was an atrocity that struck at the very core of what it meant to be human. The protection of children, a principle encoded in virtually every human culture, had been violated in the most brutal way possible. As Dr. Chen lay paralyzed on the deck of her ship, forced to witness everything, her tears of grief slowly transformed into something else. The Nexeri, in their arrogant pursuit of knowledge, had made a crucial error in their assessment of humanity. They had classified humans as a species driven by logic and self-preservation, noting our technological advancement and social structures. What they failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength lay not in our technology or our intelligence, but in our capacity for both love and rage. They had no concept of the fury they had awakened, no understanding of the terrible price they would pay for their clinical cruelty. As the stellar horizon was towed away toward Nexeri space, its crew still paralyzed but conscious, the first phases of Protocol Prometheus were already beginning. In facilities hidden throughout the solar system, massive doors began to open. The weapons humanity had prayed it would never need to use were about to be unleashed. The Nexeri believed they had found an inferior species to study and subjugate. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. Humanity's response would rewrite the very nature of warfare in the galaxy, and at its heart would be a mother's grief transformed into vengeance, and a species united in its determination to ensure that no alien race would ever again dare to harm a human child. Admiral Helena Santos stood in the command center of Titan Base, carved deep within Saturn's largest moon. Around her, hundreds of technicians and military personnel worked with quiet intensity, their movements precise and purposeful. On the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room, a countdown timer ticked away the moments until humanity's response would begin. "Final status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of decades of military service. Colonel Marcus Zhang stepped forward, his tablet displaying streams of data from across the solar system. "All 6 Titan-class vessels are at full power, Admiral. The asteroid camouflage systems are disengaging as planned. Crews are reporting ready status across all ships." For 30 years, humanity had hidden its greatest achievement in plain sight. 6 of the largest asteroids in the solar system had been hollowed out and transformed into massive warships, each one larger than any vessel ever constructed in human history. The project had consumed trillions in resources, all hidden through a complex web of shell companies and classified budgets. The Titan ships represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Each asteroid ship contained enough firepower to level a continent, powered by artificial quantum singularities that could fuel them for centuries. Their hull material, a revolutionary metamaterial that could adapt and repair itself, made them nearly indestructible by conventional weapons. "Signal from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Sarah O'Malley. "Protocol Prometheus has been upgraded to Phase 2. We have authorization for full deployment." Admiral Santos nodded slowly, her mind going to the footage that had sparked this response. The death of Lucy Chen had done more than just enrage humanity. It had united them. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth had voted unanimously in the UN Security Council. There would be no diplomatic outreach, no attempts at peaceful resolution. The Nexeri had crossed a line that humanity would not forgive. "Begin launch sequence," Santos ordered. "All ships, prepare for emergence." Across the solar system, the seemingly ordinary asteroids began to change. Their rocky surfaces cracked and fell away, revealing sleek, dark hulls beneath. Massive engines, previously hidden in deep craters, ignited with the power of small suns. The deception that had kept humanity's ultimate weapons hidden was no longer necessary. On the bridge of the flagship, christened TCS Prometheus, Admiral Santos watched as her fleet took shape. Each ship was unique, designed to fulfill a specific role in combat. The Prometheus itself was the command vessel, equipped with the most advanced quantum computers ever created. TCS Atlas carried the heaviest weapons, while TCS Hyperion specialized in electronic warfare. TCS Helios was designed for speed and maneuverability despite its massive size, and TCS Oceanus carried vast squadrons of autonomous fighter craft. The final vessel, TCS Cronus, housed technology so advanced that most of its capabilities remained classified even to the fleet's commanding officers. Message from Dr. Chen, O'Malley reported quietly. She's requesting permission to join the fleet. Santos closed her eyes briefly. Sarah Chen had been recovered 3 days ago, along with most of the Stellar Horizons crew, by a covert operations team. The Nexeri, arrogant in their superiority, hadn't expected anyone to be able to track their ships through quantum space. They had been wrong. Santos closed her eyes briefly. Sarah Chen had been recovered 3 days ago, along with most of the Stellar Horizons crew, by a covert operations team. The Nexeri, arrogant in their superiority, hadn't expected anyone to be able to track their ships through quantum space. They had been wrong. Grant her request, Santos replied. Assign her to Prometheus. Her knowledge of the Nexeri from first-hand experience could prove invaluable. As the fleet prepared for departure, Santos received one final transmission from Earth. It was a simple message, but one that carried the combined will of humanity. Remember Lucy. The Titan ships moved with grace that belied their enormous size, their quantum drives allowing them to navigate with precision that would have seemed impossible for vessels of their scale. As they assembled in formation near Saturn's rings, Santos gave the order that would begin humanity's first interstellar war. All ships, prepare for quantum jump. Our first target is the Nexeri outpost in the Proxima Centauri system. They believe they understand humanity. They believe they can treat us like laboratory specimens. Today, we show them how wrong they are. The quantum drives of all 6 ships spun up simultaneously, creating a cascading effect that was visible as a ripple in space-time itself. In the moments before the jump, Santos thought about the history they were about to make. Humanity had hidden these ships, hoping they would never be needed. Now they would demonstrate why peaceful species should never be pushed too far. To all ships, she broadcast across the fleet. The Nexeri thought they found an inferior species to study. Instead, they found humanity. They killed a child in the name of scientific progress. Our response will be neither measured nor merciful. Today, we show the galaxy what it means to awaken humanity's fury. With a flash of quantum energy that briefly outshone Saturn's rings, the fleet disappeared into the depths of space. The asteroids that had hidden humanity's greatest weapons for decades were gone, leaving behind only drifting debris as evidence of their deception. In the command center of the Prometheus, Dr. Sarah Chen stood watching the quantum wake fade behind them. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands were clenched tight enough to whiten her knuckles. The Nexeri had taken her daughter, believing they were simply gathering data on an inferior species. Now they would learn what a human mother's grief could unleash upon the galaxy. The Titan fleet accelerated through quantum space, carrying with them humanity's response to an unforgivable crime. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been so afraid of their own potential for violence, and why they had worked so hard to keep it contained. The Nexeri defense fleet above Aurora Colony hung in space like a swarm of metallic insects, their ships' iridescent hulls reflecting the light of the system's binary stars. 200 vessels, each one representing the pinnacle of Nexeri military technology, stood ready to defend their newly claimed territory. They had taken the human colony 3 days ago, adding its population to their ongoing study of humanity. Arction Vexthera stood on the bridge of the flagship, multiple eyes scanning the tactical displays. The human settlement below had proven to be an excellent source of test subjects, though the specimen's constant emotional displays were becoming tedious to document. Arction, one of the sensor operators, called out, their crystalline features reflecting the purple emergency lights that had suddenly begun pulsing. Quantum disturbance detected. Scale unprecedented. Before Vexthera could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. 6 massive objects emerged from quantum space, and for a moment, The Archon's logical mind refused to accept what the sensors were showing. The vessels were the size of small moons, their dark hulls seeming to drink in the starlight. "Impossible," Vexthra whispered, all four hands moving across control surfaces as they attempted to process the data. Their technological level was assessed at. The transmission that cut across all Nexari frequencies was clear and cold. "This is Admiral Helena Santos of the Terran Combined Fleet. You have committed crimes against humanity. Surrender now, or be destroyed." Dr. Sarah Chen stood at her station aboard the Prometheus, her fingers dancing across the quantum computing interface. The vast arrays of sensors under her control painted a precise picture of the enemy fleet's capabilities. "Admiral, their shield frequencies are synchronized across their entire fleet. They're using a unified defense grid." Santos nodded, a grim smile crossing her face. "Just as we expected. Their arrogance makes them predictable. Execute battle plan Theta." The Titan ships moved with impossible grace for objects of their size. TCS Atlas, the heavy weapons platform, oriented its main gun, a weapon that used controlled quantum singularities as ammunition. TCS Hyperion began broadcasting across the electromagnetic spectrum, its electronic warfare suite targeting the Nexari fleet's unified shields. The Nexari responded with typical precision, their ships moving in perfect formation as they launched their first assault. Purple energy beams lashed out, the same weapons that had so easily penetrated the stellar horizon's defenses. But the Titan ships were different. Their metamaterial hulls absorbed the energy, redistributing it throughout their systems. The Nexari weapons, which had never failed before, simply made the human ships stronger. "Target their flagship," Santos ordered. "Dr. Chen, do you recognize the energy signature?" Sarah's hands clenched as she analyzed the data. "Yes, that's the same ship that took Lucy." "I'm certain. Then they have the honor of being our first demonstration. Atlas, you may fire when ready." The quantum singularity cannon activated, its power draw briefly dimming the lights across the entire fleet. A point of absolute darkness shot across space, trailing distorted space-time in its wake. The Nexari flagship's shields, designed to deflect energy and matter, had no defense against a weapon that used gravity itself as ammunition. The massive alien vessel was torn apart from the inside out, crushed into a ball of superheated matter no larger than a basketball before the singularity was contained and dissipated by the weapon's failsafes. Archon Vexthra, who had believed themselves to be conducting a simple scientific expedition, vanished in an instant. The Nexari fleet's perfect formation faltered for the first time. Their unified shield grid, previously a strength, became a vulnerability as Hyperion's electronic warfare suite found and exploited the single frequency they all shared. Across their formation, shields flickered and died. "Launch fighter squadrons," Santos commanded. "Oceanus, show them what our automated combat systems can do." Thousands of unmanned fighters poured from Oceanus's launch bays, each one powered by quantum computers and artificial intelligence that could react faster than any organic pilot. They swarmed through the Nexari formation, their weapons precisely targeted to disable rather than destroy. "Admiral," Sarah called out, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "I'm detecting human life signs on 17 of their ships. They're holding prisoners from Aurora Colony." Santos nodded grimly. "Helios, deploy your boarding teams. Get our people out. Then we'll show the Nexari exactly what humanity does to those who cage our children." The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies across known space. The Nexari, for all their technological advancement, had never faced an enemy that combined overwhelming force with precise surgical strikes. Their attempts to adapt their tactics were too slow, too bound by their rigid hierarchical thinking. TCS Cronus, which had remained silent and seemingly inactive until now, finally revealed one of its classified capabilities. A field of twisted space-time expanded from the massive ship, trapping 30 Nexari vessels in a time dilation effect that made them appear to move in slow motion. Message from the colony. Lieutenant O'Malley reported. Ground forces are reporting that the Nexari research facilities have been secured. All human prisoners are being evacuated. Sarah watched the tactical display, her scientific mind cataloging the Nexari's weaknesses, even as her heart burned with the need for vengeance. Their ship designs, she noted, they're all optimized for combat against enemies of similar or inferior technology. They never conceived of facing something so far beyond their understanding. A common failing, Santos replied, for species that believe themselves to be superior. Colonel Jung, status of the enemy fleet. 147 ships destroyed or disabled. 53 attempting to retreat. All human prisoners have been recovered. Santos stood from her command chair, her voice carrying across the bridge. Let some of them escape. The Nexari need to understand exactly what they've awakened. Today was just a demonstration. The surviving Nexari ships flood into quantum space, carrying with them sensor data that would send shockwaves through their empire. Humanity, which they had classified as a primitive species worthy only of study, had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. As the Titan fleet secured orbit around Aurora Colony, Sarah Chen received word that among the rescued prisoners were 37 children. The Nexari had been preparing to subject them to the same tests that had killed Lucy. Admiral, she said quietly, request permission to oversee the analysis of the captured Nexari research data. Santos studied the scientist for a moment before nodding. Granted. Learn everything you can about them, Doctor. The Nexari wanted to study humanity. Let's return the favor. The battle for Aurora Colony was over, but it was only the beginning. The Titan fleet had revealed itself, and humanity's response to the death of a single child was just beginning to unfold. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been so careful to control their capacity for violence, and what happened when that control was finally released. Supreme Archon Helvaxis stood in the Grand Archive of the Nexari Dominion, their crystalline form reflecting the emergency lights that now pulsed through the massive chamber. Around them, the most powerful members of the Nexari Scientific Council viewed the battle footage from Aurora Colony for the 100th time, watching their fleet's destruction with increasing despair. Impossible, whispered First Scholar Mex then, their mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Their technological level was assessed at Class 3. These vessels, these weapons, they're beyond even our theoretical understanding. We were deceived. Catalvaxis responded, their harmonic voice carrying a note that no Nexari had expressed in 10,000 years. Fear. The humans hid their true capabilities behind a facade of primitive spacecraft and limited colonial expansion. The question is why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Junior researcher Zinra, who had survived the battle aboard one of the few ships that escaped, stepped forward. Supreme Archon, I believe I understand. They were not hiding out of deception, but restraint. The assembled leaders turned their compound eyes toward the junior researcher, who activated a holographic display. Images of human history flickered through the air, their wars, their achievements, their stories, and art and music. But most importantly, their children. In my studies of human culture before the incident, Zinra continued, I noticed a pattern. Their species possesses immense capacity for violence, yet they constantly work to contain it. They create laws, build institutions, establish moral codes, all to keep their destructive potential in check. And at the center of all these constraints is one universal principle, the protection of their young. The display showed footage from the stellar horizon, the moment when Lucy Chen was taken for examination. Kyle Vaxis watched again as their scientists, following standard protocol, proceeded with their testing despite the specimen's obvious distress. We thought their emotional displays were signs of weakness, Zinra explained. We were wrong. Their emotions, particularly regarding their offspring, are the source of their greatest strength. By killing the child, we didn't just violate their laws or moral codes, we gave them reason to unleash everything they had been holding back. In orbit above the Nexari homeworld, Automated sensors detected multiple quantum space disturbances. The Titan fleet had arrived, but this time they weren't alone. Hundreds of smaller vessels, though still far larger than anything the Nexeri had fielded before the war, emerged alongside them. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, Dr. Sarah Chen at her side. The scientist's face was impassive as she studied the readings from the Nexeri homeworld, but her hands trembled slightly as she worked. "Their orbital defenses are more extensive than we anticipated," Sarah reported. "They've attempted to adapt their shields based on data from Aurora Colony. But," she paused, allowing herself a small, cold smile, "they still don't understand the fundamental principles behind our quantum singularity weapons." Santos nodded, studying the tactical display. The Nexeri had gathered their entire remaining fleet to defend their homeworld. Over 1,000 ships arranged in complex defensive formations. Under other circumstances, it would have been an impressive sight. "Dr. Chen, you've studied their research data, their behavior with Lucy. Was it simple cruelty?" Sarah's hands stilled on her console. "No, that's what makes it worse. They genuinely didn't understand. In their society, the concept of childhood doesn't exist as we know it. Their young emerge fully formed with downloaded racial memories. They literally cannot comprehend what they took from us." "Understanding isn't required for justice," Santos replied quietly. "Colonel Zhang, is the package ready?" "Yes, Admiral. TCS Kronos reports the temporal displacement device is charged and ready." In the Grand Archive, the Nexeri leaders were still debating their response when a transmission cut across all their communications channels. The human admiral's face appeared on their displays, her expression as cold as the void between stars. "This is Admiral Helena Santos of the Terran Combined Fleet. We have disabled your orbital defenses and blocked all quantum space frequencies. Your empire is now cut off from its colonies, but we're not here to destroy you." Supreme Archon Kilvaxis stepped forward. "Then what do you want?" "Education," Santos replied simply. "You took one of our children to study humanity. Now we're going to teach you exactly what that means." "Dr. Chen." Sarah's face replaced Santos on the screen, and even the Nexeri, with their limited understanding of human expressions, could see the pain and rage in her eyes. "You killed my daughter to satisfy your scientific curiosity. Now you're going to experience something new to your species: regret." The temporal displacement device aboard Kronos activated, enveloping the entire Nexeri homeworld in a field of distorted time. Within the field, time would pass differently, faster for their computers and technology, slower for organic matter. Their entire civilization would experience the grinding halt of progress, watching as their machines aged centuries in what felt like days. "For the next subjective year," Sarah continued, "you will live with your technology crumbling around you. You will feel helpless, watching everything you built decay while you can do nothing to stop it. Just as I had to watch, helpless, as you killed my child. Consider it a research opportunity." The Nexeri leaders stared in horror as their displays began to age before their eyes, crystal screens developing cracks, quantum processors burning out in what seemed like moments. Their perfect, orderly society was about to experience chaos for the first time in their history. "When the field dissolves," Santos added, "we will return. If you have learned the value of empathy, of understanding the consequences of your actions, we will help you rebuild. If not," she let the threat hang unspoken. As the Titan fleet prepared to depart, leaving the Nexeri to their temporal prison, Sarah Chen watched the planet's surface through the quantum sensors. Somewhere down there, in their archives, was the data from their experiments on Lucy, data they had considered worth her daughter's life. "Admiral," she said softly, "request permission to lead the evaluation team when we return." Santos studied her for a moment before nodding. "Granted. After all, who better to judge if they've learned their lesson than a mother who lost her child to their ignorance?" The fleet disappeared into quantum space, leaving behind a civilization facing its first true crisis in millennia. The Nexeri were about to learn that there are some lines that should never be crossed, some actions that cannot be justified by scientific curiosity. And humanity, in teaching this lesson, revealed just how far they would go to protect their own and punish those who harmed them. 1 year had passed in the outside universe, though on the Nexeri homeworld, the experience had been very different. Their civilization, trapped in the temporal displacement field, had watched generations of technological advancement crumble in what felt like days. The crystalline spires of their cities showed the wear of centuries, their quantum networks had collapsed, and their once perfect society had been forced to adapt to a world where nothing worked as it should. The Titan fleet returned exactly as promised, emerging from quantum space above a changed world. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at her station aboard the Prometheus, analyzing the sensor data from the planet below. The readings told a story of transformation that went far beyond the physical decay of their infrastructure. "Admiral," she reported, her voice steady despite the emotions roiling beneath the surface, "I'm detecting significant changes in their social structure. The rigid hierarchies have broken down. They've established care centers for their young." Admiral Santos raised an eyebrow at this last detail. "Care centers? Explain." The temporal field had an unexpected effect on their reproductive cycle. Their young are emerging without the racial memories, experiencing something like childhood for the first time in their species' history. They've had to learn to nurture, to teach, to protect. The transmission from the surface came not from the Supreme Archon, but from junior researcher Zinra, now speaking on behalf of a hastily assembled Council of Survival. The Nexeri's appearance had changed. Their crystalline features showed signs of adaptation, organic patterns that had never been seen before in their species. "We understand now." Zinra's harmonics carried new overtones of emotion that would have been considered a sign of deficiency a year ago. "The temporal field didn't just age our technology. It forced us to experience time as you do, to feel the weight of moments, to understand loss and growth and change. We have learned what it means to watch the young struggle." Dr. Chen stepped forward, facing the alien who had been part of the research team that had taken her daughter. "Show me," she demanded quietly. The Titan fleet maintained orbit as Sarah Chen led a delegation to the surface. The Nexeri capital, once a monument to geometric perfection, now showed signs of organic adaptation and change. But it was in a converted research facility that they found the most profound transformation. Where once cold laboratories had housed specimens for study, now there were spaces filled with young Nexeri, their crystalline forms showing variation and imperfection that would have been eliminated in the past. Adult Nexeri watched over them with what could only be described as concern, helping them learn and grow naturally rather than through downloaded memories. "We kept perfect records of everything," Zinra explained as they walked through the facility. "Every experiment, every test, every—" They paused, mandibles clicking in what Sarah now recognized as distress. "Every death, including your daughter's. We thought we were advancing science. We didn't understand we were destroying ourselves." In a quiet moment, while the rest of the delegation reviewed the Nexeri's proposed peace terms, Sarah found herself in the archive room where the records were kept. Her hands moved across the crystal storage devices, each one containing data bought with lives and suffering. "Dr. Chen," Zinra spoke from the doorway, "there is something else we would show you, if you are willing." They led her to a new section of the facility, one that hadn't existed before the temporal field. Inside, a memorial had been constructed. Images and data about every species the Nexeri had studied lined the walls, but at the center was a hologram of a young human girl. "Lucy Chen," Zinra said softly, "the one who taught us the meaning of conscience. Every young one who emerges now learns her story first, before any racial memories are shared. They learn what we did, and why it was wrong, and what it cost, not just your people, but ours." Sarah stood before the hologram of her daughter, her hands clenched at her sides. "You can't bring her back." "No," Zinra agreed, "but we can ensure her death continues to have meaning. Our species is changing, Dr. Chen. We are learning to feel, to care, to understand the value of life beyond data. It is uncomfortable, frightening even, but necessary. Back aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Santos reviewed the Nexary's proposal. Their empire would be disbanded, their colonies given independence. Their technology would be scaled back, monitored. But most significantly, they requested human advisors to help them understand and develop their newfound capacity for emotion and empathy. It's not justice, Sarah said, looking at the proposal. Nothing can be. No, Santos agreed, but perhaps it's something more important. Progress. They're the first species we've encountered that's proven capable of fundamental change. That's worth something. The final terms of peace included an unprecedented provision. The Nexari would dedicate their considerable scientific knowledge to understanding and protecting the development of young minds, both their own and those of other species. The facility where Lucy died would become an intergalactic center for childhood development studies. As the Titan fleet prepared to return to Earth, Sarah Chen made one final visit to the surface. In the memorial room, she added something to the display. A small, worn photograph of Lucy on her 10th birthday, smiling at the camera with the innocent joy that had been taken from her. "The humans have a saying," she told Zinra. "From the greatest suffering comes the potential for the greatest growth. Your people killed my daughter because you couldn't understand the value of a child's life. Now you'll spend the rest of your existence protecting and nurturing the young of every species you encounter. It's not forgiveness, but it's a start." The Nexari Dominion had sought to study humanity and had instead been transformed by them. The galaxy learned several crucial lessons: that humans' greatest strength lay not in their hidden weapons or massive ships, but in their capacity to turn grief into change, to forge meaning from loss. The death of one child had reshaped an empire, not through destruction, but through understanding. As the Titan fleet jumped into quantum space, Sarah Chen looked one last time at the changed world below. Lucy's death had sparked a war, but her memory would inspire something far more powerful: evolution. The Nexari would never again be the cold, clinical species they once were. They had learned to feel, to care, to protect, and in doing so, had become something new. The greatest weapons humanity possessed weren't their planet-sized ships or quantum singularity cannons. It was their ability to feel deeply, to change their enemies not just through force, but through understanding. They had come seeking vengeance, but had achieved transformation. In the end, humanity's response to the death of a child hadn't just been about punishment. It had been about ensuring that such a tragedy would never happen again. And in that, they had succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined.